My husband humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, leaving me for a millionaire at our own awards gala. He thought he was taking the entire company we built together. But he forgot one thing: I was the one who wrote the contracts. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The ballroom was too warm, or perhaps that was just the fever. I was still weak, recovering from a nasty bout of pneumonia that had left me bedridden for 2 weeks. But this was the Innovators Gala, the most important night of the year for Vance & Co., the interior design firm my husband, Marcus, and I had built from nothing. I couldn't miss it. I had pulled myself together, pinning a forced smile to my face, just to be here to support him. Marcus was on stage, bathed in a spotlight, accepting the Design Visionary of the Year award. He was in his element, charming and magnetic. I watched from our table, my hands clasped in my lap, feeling a familiar mix of pride and exhaustion. I was the financial brain, the one who turned his grand ideas into profitable realities, but he was the face. He was the star. "This award isn't just for me," he said, his voice smooth and confident, booming across the silent room. "This year, my vision has been truly elevated. It's been clarified by a new partner." My smile faltered. A new partner? We hadn't discussed any new partners. A partner who sees the future, who isn't afraid to shed the past to build something truly spectacular. He turned, gesturing to a front table. A woman I didn't recognize, polished and looking far too pleased with herself, raised her glass. "So, I want to thank my new muse and partner, Serafina Belmont," Marcus announced. My blood ran cold. He continued, "And to that end, Serafina and I will be launching a new venture. I am dissolving my partnership with Vance & Co. and, as of tonight, with my wife." The spotlight was still on him, but every eye in the room swiveled to me. The gasp was collective. I sat frozen, the heat from my fever replaced by an icy dread. He hadn't just left me. He had done it publicly, professionally, and personally, all in one devastating blow. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The rest of that night was a blur of muffled sounds and sympathetic, pitying stares. I don't remember how I got home. I just remember the crushing silence of our large, beautifully designed house, a house I had personally financed. The next morning, the physical illness and the emotional shock merged into a single, suffocating weight. I couldn't get out of bed. My lungs ached, but my heart ached more. The design blogs and society pages were already exploding. Marcus Vance leaves wife for tech millionaire. Vance & Co. shuddered. My phone buzzed relentlessly, but I ignored it. Finally, a call came through that I couldn't ignore. It was Marcus. I let it ring 5 times before picking up, my hand trembling. "Sophia," he said. His voice was not apologetic. It was brisk, businesslike. "I assume you saw my announcement." "How could you?" I whispered, the only words I could muster. "Look, Sophia, this is for the best. You've been holding the firm back. You're too cautious. Serafina understands my vision. We're moving forward." Holding it back. I was the one who had secured the credit lines, managed the payroll, and negotiated the contracts that made his vision possible. "Don't make this difficult," he sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "My lawyers will be in touch. They'll draw up a fair offer to buy you out of your half of the company. Just sign the papers, and we can all move on." He hung up, just like that. 20 years of marriage, 15 years of business, ended in a 30-second phone call. He was so arrogant, so sure of himself. He and his new millionaire muse thought they could just erase me with a check, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. Marcus and I started Vance & Co. in our tiny apartment living room. I was a junior financial analyst, and he was a junior designer with big dreams and a portfolio full of sketches. I believed in him. I cashed in my 401k, took out a second mortgage, and worked 80-hour weeks. For the first 5 years, I handled every invoice, every client contract, and every tax filing, all while holding down my full-time job until the firm was stable. Marcus was the talent, I never denied that, but I was the one who built the scaffolding that allowed his talent to soar. He loved the dinners, the awards, the magazine spreads. He hated the spreadsheets, the legal reviews, and the budget meetings. "You handle the boring stuff, Sophia," he'd always say, kissing my forehead. "You're so good at it." I had met Serafina Belmont once before, a few months ago. She had too. Youred our studio, ostensibly as a potential client for a new tech campus. She was sharp, dressed in severe, expensive clothing, and her eyes scanned everything with an unnerving, acquisitive gleam. She had directed all her questions to Marcus, barely acknowledging my presence, even when I answered a complex financial query. "Marcus, your vision for the nexus of art and commerce is revolutionary," she had gushed. I remembered one pointed comment she'd made, looking at our portfolio. "It seems your firm is very conservative," she'd said, a polite criticism. "So much potential, if only it were unleashed." At the time, I thought it was just a client's opinion. Now, I saw it for what it was, the beginning of a hostile takeover. She wasn't just influencing him, she was poaching him. She saw him as a creative asset to acquire, and I was just a liability to be cleared from the balance sheet. She was the one who gave him the confidence to believe he didn't need me. For 2 days, I lay in bed, allowing myself to grieve. I let the shock, the humiliation, and the profound sense of loss wash over me. And then, on the 3rd day, I got up. The fever had broken, and in its place was a cold, clear resolve. Marcus saw me as a cautious bookkeeper. Serafina saw me as a discarded wife. They were both about to learn who I really was. I didn't call Marcus back. I didn't release a statement to the press. I called my lawyer, a woman named Helen, who specialized in high-asset corporate litigation. "He's dissolving the partnership and wants to buy me out of Vance & Co." I explained, my voice steady for the first time in days. "Well, his timing is dramatic," Helen said dryly. "What's his offer?" "He hasn't made one, he just said his lawyers would be in touch," I replied. "But Helen, they're in for a surprise." I explained the clever trap I had set years ago. Early on, when we were taking on massive commercial projects, I was terrified of liability. I created a separate, private holding company, SV Holdings. It was a simple entity, registered only in my name, designed to protect our personal assets. But as we grew, I quietly structured the business so that SV Holdings, not Vance & Co., legally owned all the firm's most valuable assets. The Vance & Co. brand name and all its intellectual property, owned by my holding company, our portfolio of high-value, multi-year client contracts, all signed with SV Holdings. The design patents for our bespoke furniture line, all filed under SV Holdings. Vance & Co. was just an operational shell. It leased the brand name, the clients, and the designs from my company. It also held all the debt. "So," Helen said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "Marcus just publicly abandoned a company that has no assets and all the liabilities." "Exactly," I said. "Let them make their offer." A week later, the offer arrived. It was delivered by a sneering junior lawyer from a top-tier firm. As expected, it was a lowball. They were offering me a paltry sum for my 50% stake, claiming the company had significant operational debts and that its value was entirely tied to Marcus's future-facing brand. They were arrogant. They hadn't even bothered to do their due diligence. My lawyer, Helen, sent a polite reply. We accepted their valuation of Vance & Co.'s assets, which was, technically, zero. However, we requested a full accounting of all assets leased by the company to ensure a clean separation. This sent them scrambling. A few days later, a much more senior legal team requested a meeting. This time, Serafina was with them. She looked like she had just swallowed a lemon. "This is a joke," Serafina said flatly, sliding a file across the table. "SV Holdings, what is this?" "That," Helen said, "is the company you're actually in business with. Or rather, the company that owns everything you thought you were acquiring. The client contracts, the brand, the patents, they all belong to you. Serafina directed the question at me, her eyes narrowed. Yes, I said quietly. This is fraud, Marcus, who had been silent, finally exploded. You tricked me, you hid this from me. I did no such thing, Marcus, I replied, my voice perfectly calm. I presented these documents to you at our quarterly reviews for 8 years. You're the one who signed the lease agreements between Vance and Co. and SV Holdings. You just called it the boring stuff and signed wherever I told you to. Serafina's face was pale. Her legal team was whispering frantically. She had attached her name to a man who, it turned out, was not a multimillionaire partner. He was an employee with a fancy title, and he had just abandoned his post, leaving him with 50% of the debt from the empty shell. The fallout was immediate and glorious. Serafina Belmont did not become a millionaire by making bad investments. The day after our meeting, a story was leaked to the same blogs that had chronicled my humiliation. The headline read, Serafina Belmont withdraws from Vance partnership, citing financial irregularities. She didn't just dump him, she publicly branded him as a financial risk. She cut him off completely, leaving him to deal with the legal and financial mess he had created. Marcus was in a freefall. He was locked out of his email, his clients were being rerouted, and the Vance and Co. bank accounts were frozen to cover the outstanding debts. He called me, not with apologies, but with rage. You've ruined me, he shouted into the phone. That was my company, those were my clients. They were our clients, Marcus, I said, and they were contracted to my company. The company you chose to leave. I'll sue you, I'll tell everyone what you did. Please do, I said, and for the first time, I let a little of my anger show. Tell them how you signed legal documents without reading them. Tell them how you publicly abandoned your wife and your business in the same speech. See how that works out for you. He was still blustering when I hung up. He was a child throwing a tantrum, finally realizing his actions had consequences. While he was floundering, I was working. I rebranded SV Holdings to Sophia Vance Designs. I called our top clients personally, explained the restructuring, and assured them their projects were secure. To my relief, they didn't care about Marcus's vision. They cared about stability and results, which I had always provided. Then I got a call. It was from the board of the prestigious Ethelred Hotel Group, a massive international contract Marcus had been chasing for years. They had heard about the split. They wanted to meet with me. My new office was smaller than the sprawling, ostentatious studio Marcus had insisted on, but it was mine. It was sleek, efficient, and profitable. We were in the middle of a design presentation for the Ethelred Hotel contract when my assistant buzzed, her voice nervous. Ms. Vance, your husband is here. He doesn't have an appointment. Let him in, I said, my voice calm. Marcus stormed into the conference room. He was a mess. His suit was wrinkled, his hair was unkempt, and his eyes were wild with desperation. The charm was gone, replaced by a sour petulance. What is this? He demanded, gesturing wildly around the office. You're stealing my clients. Ethelred was my lead. They were a lead for a company you abandoned, Marcus, I said, standing up. The hotel executives looked on with mild, curious interest. I'm suing you for everything, he yelled. You can't do this. I built that company. No, Marcus, we built it, and I protected it. Helen, my lawyer, who I had asked to be present, stepped forward. Mr. Vance, she said, if you're referring to Vance and Co., you are still 50% owner. Of course, the company is currently being audited to address its significant debts. You'll be liable for half of those. The debts, he stammered. As for the clients, the brand, and the intellectual property, Helen continued, placing a thick, bound document on the table, here are the lease agreements you signed, transferring all rights and ownership to SV Holdings. And here, she added another paper, is the termination of lease clause, which you triggered when you publicly dissolved your partnership. Marcus stared at the papers, his face crumbling. He finally understood. It wasn't just that he had lost the company. It was that he had, with his own arrogant words, given it all to me and kept only the debt. "Sophia, please," he whispered, the anger gone, replaced by a pathetic plea. I made a mistake." "Yes, you did," I said, picking up my presentation notes. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a meeting." He just stood there, a broken man in an expensive, wrinkled suit, as security escorted him out. We landed the Ethelred Hotel contract. It was the largest in my company's history, and the design we delivered won 3 industry awards the following year. Sophia Vance Designs became synonymous with integrity and innovation. I was no longer the woman behind the man, I was simply the woman. Marcus's downfall was as public as his betrayal. He was, as promised, saddled with 50% of the massive debts from the now-defunct Vance and co-creditors sued him for the lavish company cars and expensive leases he had signed. He tried to start his own consultancy, but his name was toxic. Serafina's financial irregularities comment had stuck to him. He was a designer with no designs, no clients, and no credit. The financial revenge wasn't a single moment. It was the slow, steady hum of my new, successful life. It was the peace I felt in my new office, the respect I got from my clients, and the freedom of knowing I had built something that could not be taken from me. I saw an article about him a year later. He was living in a small, rented apartment, and he was being sued by 2 other designers for non-payment. He had lost everything, not because I took it from him, but because he had thrown it all away in a single, arrogant speech. I closed the browser, took a sip of my coffee, and looked out my office window at the city. The pneumonia was a distant memory, and the fever of betrayal had long since passed. I was healthy, I was successful, and I was, for the first time in a very long time, truly at peace.